Welcome to the Dev Ready podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Liz Ross. She is the investor relations at Tidal Ventures, but has a background in go-to-market as one of the biggest topics we'll talk about today. How that flavors into from working at Microsoft through to Dovetail as an early stage part of the founding team, not founder, early stage hire, going into a team that was about 120 before you left, and now jumping into Tidal Ventures as investor relations. So, a little bit to unpack. Liz, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. So as you mentioned, I'm currently at Tidal Ventures, which is a um, focused on backing early stage B2B AI companies at the moment,
Hmm.
which is a
Yep.
little bit of a evolution from the software. Our first two funds were focused on B2B software with a little bit of predictive AI
Hmm.
layered in there. Um, and then now, obviously, as the market moves,
As the
there's more.
market has had a
Yeah,
total shift, I would say,
yeah,
to
yeah.
AI. Everything has an AI
Everyone's
focus or
shifting
lens
there.
right now, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think the thing is there is a little bit of like nervousness around that as well, around it being hype, which I can definitely sort of talk to. But for
Mm.
me, AI is just an evolution of software. You know,
Yep.
it fundamentally is the same thing when it's solving for like an industry problem. Um, but yeah, so that's our focus.
Okay.
We have prominence in Australia,
Hmm.
um, just because of the structure of our fund says that we invest 80% in Australia.
Okay.
Um, but additionally, Australia is a great place to do that
Hmm.
for a couple of reasons, which I can also touch on. And then we have a venture partner out of the US um, who is really good at deal origination out there. And so 20% of our deals, while we say global, a lot of them do come from the US.
Yes. Okay.
And so that's Tidal in a nutshell.
Hmm.
I can sort of talk more to the background of Tidal in a little bit, but in terms of my background,
Mm.
I sort of cut my teeth in financial services marketing before moving across to technology um, and go-to-market teams. So my first move to technology was at Microsoft in Australia, and I worked across a bunch of different products while I was there. The model for Microsoft in Australia is sort of you have like a centralized marketing team, and then all the different products almost like bid for your time on certain projects. So you get quite like a broad overview of all of the products. So some examples might be I worked on an sort of Azure government project, which was
Hmm.
around sort of the future of warfare,
Okay.
all the way
That'd be a
to
fascinating project going on in
yeah,
there.
it really
Yeah.
was. It was
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
like a lot of Microsoft folks that work in the government and defense areas in the US are
Mm.
sort of ex-Navy, ex-Army, and so
Okay.
they have like quite an interesting past and understanding
Hmm.
of how technology actually impacts things on the ground. Um, and then you've got like other projects I worked on was Satya Nadella was coming to Australia to actually talk to developers.
Okay.
It was a
Yeah.
specific event just to speak to um, software engineers or software developers.
Hmm.
And so worked on that piece and then additionally worked on at the time, which was the AI Business School. Where we were partnering with a institution to ensure more board members were familiar with the concept of AI and how it would impact them. It was actually quite a complex pool at the time, which it wouldn't be so much now. But that was you sort of that shows the breadth of things that I worked on while I was there, and just how Microsoft pulls the marketing prowess or the
Hmm.
go-to-market prowess, and then activates it into the different areas that it should be activated into.
Yeah,
Um,
very broad range, right? So, and you
yeah, it
mentioned
really
bit
is.
the projects are sort of bidding for your requirements. I imagine that was a bit of
Look,
internal conflict, or how does that work in terms of which project gets the most
it's
eyeballs or which gets the most help?
There's definitely enough team. Well, at the time, there was definitely enough team members to fulfill everything you needed. And the
That
thing about
helps.
Microsoft
Yeah.
is you also have a really, really amazing bench of agencies.
Hmm.
Um, and so, really, if you weren't able to find the internal resource that was the perfect fit, you did have many options.
Okay.
I would say that not many people in Microsoft go wanting,
Yeah.
as it relates
You'd
to.
imagine not, no.
No.
Given
Uh,
size, scale, and profitability of the
exactly.
organisation, you'd think not. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and just the sophistication, I think and I can talk about the juxtaposition of Microsoft versus like my next move, which was into a startup, but you're talking about like a planning from like 18 months out.
Mm.
So your resource allocation is actually incredibly well thought through at
Hmm.
Microsoft.
Okay.
And it sort of does a waterfall effect of like 18 months out really what the projects you're going to do. And so you need to know whether you need to go and hire more contractors,
Hmm.
onboard more agencies, all that kind of stuff, which, as I said, is, yeah, juxtaposition to my
It's
next
that's a
move.
very, very different space to what we're talking about, obviously, with corporate structure and
Yes.
opportunity and resources everywhere. Now let's pair back to the world of startup. The
Yes.
or early
Yeah.
stage sort of product is the core focus. But the learning from that would have been brilliant in terms of understanding technology, where technology is going, working on the
Yeah.
AI school at the time. I think you mentioned offline was 2017. Getting some
Yes.
awareness about what was coming would have set you up for some success, clearly, to understand that background.
I
Dovetail,
think it's
why did you go startup? Why? Why did you go from
a great
that
question.
corporate entity, that probably cushy, comfortable job? What was the change? What happened?
I think there is an element of as someone who's in go-to-market, knowing that you are a very small piece of the puzzle,
Yes.
especially for an offshore, um, it was headquartered in the US,
Hmm.
so you were just the Australian presence. Like you might find yourself doing like localizations,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And what I think is the sheer sophistication of Microsoft, um, gets you to a point as well where you're like, is this pushing my craft
Mm.
forward?
Okay, got it.
Am I challenged enough,
Hmm.
um, at my actual craft? Um, you don't have to jump from a massive organization like that to being the fifth employee at a startup. That is a big jump. But it was the right time in my life to do that.
Good.
And I think I was at the time I was doing a little bit of like a listening tour before joining Dovetail. And so I went and met with a venture capitalist called David Shane,
Hmm.
who works at OIF. Um, and he was talking, we were sort of just sparring through the thinking there. Um, and I was talking about feeling like I was really stuck in a swim lane
Hmm.
at Microsoft. So my role wasn't bleeding out. And I found myself often handing off work to agencies that were doing a lot of like maybe more of the creative problem solving or the strategy, or even the execution. And so I
Okay.
found myself more of a broker
Hmm.
of um, of go to market
Mm.
than a strategist or
Executor.
executor,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I think, yeah, be careful what you wish for because at
I
Dovetail,
guarantee that changed pretty quickly.
yeah, I was, simultaneously the head of marketing and the marketing
Yeah.
intern.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So yeah, very, very different, but
And with
lots of
five people at the time, I'm sure you didn't just touch marketing, did you?
no,
No.
no, no.
Mm.
It was still like the team there are really incredible in terms of um I didn't just touch marketing, but
Hmm.
every single person in the organization also did touch marketing,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Makes
Like
sense. It does.
we it wasn't like you're in a silo over there, go and do what you need to do. It was more like if there was a marketing workshop where we need to do strategy, every
Hmm.
single person in the organization at the time would be part of it. And that actually persisted for quite a while,
Mm.
because everyone should touch every part of the product. And so, in that same vein, we had customer support on rotation. So whether you're an engineer and you need to build, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in customer success, whether you're a founder, regardless, was on a rotation basis to maintain that relationship to the customer,
That's
which is something
fascinating. I've never heard that before, but I get the logic because as an engineer, if you got some customer support, you're gonna hear it in a different way than someone that's just sitting in support day to day and be able to action that and execute it and support the team. Okay, potentially we've got a problem here. Let's solve for it. So there's
exactly.
interesting learning from something like that. What did you find during that process?
You'd find
Yeah.
often like the way that you maybe designed something to be used wasn't being used in that way.
Okay. Yep.
Um, I think if you're an engineer, you were able to fix bugs within a matter of hours and
Mm.
surprising and delighting the customer in that way, where they're hearing directly from the engineer that saw their issue. And solved it at speed
Yep.
was really like it was such an incredible impact on the customer to company relationship,
Hmm.
which is why we found that we had a lot of, especially in the early days, we had a lot of champions,
Got it.
advocates out of market, which is
Yeah.
incredibly important for product-led growth, which was the sort of buzzword at the time. But how do you actually make that happen? A lot of
Mm.
people talk about product-led growth and just are like, yep, just go and do product-led growth. But how do you actually ensure that occurs? And for me, I actually think product-led growth and community-led growth
Hmm.
they go hand in
Go ahead.
hand.
Mm.
And so really that's what we would find is that when you can just make someone feel heard when they're
Hmm.
using a product, and not just give them some sort of like canned response, like,
Hmm.
you know, that's an interesting feature request. We will take that into consideration, like
It
it's
doesn't
more
really
like
help, does it? Mm.
no, you might give
Yeah.
them a call up and be like, can you show me on your screen
Hmm.
how you're using the product and how that would help and where's the
Yep.
friction point? And I
Hmm.
think that mentality was really just seeded in by the founders. They're so curious.
Hmm.
They're so curious about how people are using the product.
Hmm.
And so that was the sort of response. Heard, you were constantly engaging with the customer. Um, it even got to a point where when we were growing and growing and growing, it meant that you might not touch customer support for, you know, a matter of months just
Hmm.
because of the amount of people in
Yeah,
rotation.
rotation. Yeah, like it. Yeah.
So some of the engineers would just jump in. They'd be like, hey, can I
Hmm.
do customer support for a day? I just want to get closer to the customer to understand their friction points. So
Mm.
yeah, it was like, sometimes when you were really busy, it'd be so frustrating when you knew that your rotation was coming up. Um, but I think that it was the lifeblood of the organization.
Some interesting learning for people to consider, especially early days, as to how you might approach.
Yeah.
And I feel you mentioned community, but that's really digging into customer support and how we support people at a different level, not just
Mm,
product led growth. Yes, product led growth can be seen by engineers as let's just build product and features and
yeah,
see what works. But that's really coming in at a level of how are we hand holding working with customers really tightly and
yeah,
delivering at that point, a high level of support would have been driving through the organisation, which
mm,
is then seen as how you generate advocates within the business and those champions because they see these guys have a chat, they solve the problem, or they help me work around it, or they figure out a way and deliver a solution within hours because engineers picked it up. That's
mm,
really support led, customer led in my mind as at the same time, not just product led.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's bang on. And I think the things that made us uniquely us were a couple of elements. One being, so I think one piece of the puzzle that people often overlook is the help center. And so if we were to answer any question, we would create an article off the back. Um, and the person who was sort of leading customer success at the time, he's actually gone and created a company called Hall, which
Okay.
is actually
Yeah.
around community.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Because his name's Kai, and
Yeah.
he really understood um, the importance of community as a great pillar in product-led growth.
Mm.
Um, and so, yes, anything the help center was actually an incredibly important resource. It wasn't just like, oh, we need to create a help article. It was like, how can we make sure that if we handhold one person, we can scale that out across
Mm.
the piece? I think that's a missing thing because people, when you're doing a startup, you're like, oh, that's just another thing I need to do. But with the advent of I think that is where we should be. New startups should be just creating really robust help centers,
Hmm.
whether it's video, whether it's written, whatever that might look like. I just think that's incredibly important. And the second piece to that was we had a Slack community. Now, what we didn't want in the Slack community was people just engaging and being like, hey, I have an issue with this. What's the answer? We would moderate it, but we would also leave some white space for other members of the community, our advocates, to respond. So it
Okay.
wasn't just
So
about
give
the
some
product.
room for the community to
Yeah,
help itself. Yeah, brilliant.
exactly. Like if it was urgent, like this is a bug or something like that, obviously we would jump in. There were certain tipping points, but I think in terms of if you leave room for the community to work with itself, you find advocates for the product, yes, but you also find advocates for best practices within your specific industry. And it might just have been our, ideal customer profile being researchers, designers, and product managers because they are very curious, interested, and they also want to push their craft forward. It could be a result of that, but we found and celebrated the moments when we would see us not really being active in the community for a matter of days, and you just watched people help one another
Yeah, brilliant.
out.
Yeah.
And that's really the end goal you want to get to. Now, yes, it's tedious to get there,
Mm.
but if you don't invest today in things like a help center
Hmm.
or community, you're going to sort of kick yourself down the road, I
Okay.
think. Um, and the way to think about it is how efficiently can we do this and how
Hmm.
efficiently can we bring how can we all stand to be like the pillar of thought leadership in this particular discipline while also creating a spot for people to chat to their peers in other organizations, like a safe space, I would say.
How
How
complex was that process to actually pull it off? Because it's easier
very
said than
complex.
done. People talk about community and building it and driving it, and I haven't seen many succeed very well. How, what were some of the key learnings that you took from that, and what really worked? You mentioned space, leaving space for people to leave comments, but you need some scale clearly to build community. Starting with one person leaving space, that's not really going to work. How
Yeah.
did you manage the scaling up of people and then engaging them into the community?
I think you can do a couple of
Yeah.
things. You can um, make it so that everyone at that time was also using Slack, which I think is
Hmm.
like, I think the usership would be pretty similar today.
Yep.
Um, but I think if you were to direct people on your website to that's where they're going to get help,
Hmm.
is really good. Like that's where you're going to get the speediest
Mm.
responses,
Yep. Makes sense.
as opposed to email. And
Yep.
then you start creating this element of public engagement, right? So um, if someone were to maybe post to you something privately, that's fine. Like you're not going to be like, hey, blah, blah, ask me this, but you might respond to them publicly. So you
Got
might
it.
be like, just got asked a question about X. This is how I would respond. Like, does anyone else in the community have any like, links that they would share or whatever that might look like? And then you moderate a really organic conversation.
Okay.
Um,
So
it
bringing it
is
back to community as much as you possibly can. Yep.
Yeah,
Mm.
one of our values was public by default as an organization,
Okay.
which is both internally as well. So, like, if anyone would DM their colleagues about anything that wasn't sensitive, like if it was just like work,
Hmm.
it would get pushed to a public channel.
Okay.
So it was on the person
Yep.
to be like, I'm just going to answer this on a public channel purely because,
It will add value to others. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Makes
So
sense.
that's how we worked also on our community channel. So you might respond to the person because the customer needs the answer
Hmm.
immediately, but in every single element, how you can do something once and then you want to publish it everywhere,
Mm.
which is like this like it's called like a dope, like do
Yeah.
once, publish everywhere
Yeah.
mentality, right?
Yep.
And so that's what we wanted from a customer success perspective.
How did that customer success and community then help with go to market? How much value did you see in that as you were at Dovetail? What did you see that that community drove from bringing on new clients and
Yeah.
organically rather than just direct sales and marketing?
Yeah, I think
Mm.
for while the during the time I was there,
Yeah.
there was zero outbound
Hmm.
done. So
Wow.
I suspect that there's a tip, yeah,
Wow. Okay.
there's a tipping
Yeah.
point in an
Yeah.
organization anyway
Yes.
where you move across, but
Hmm.
for the product was beautiful
Hmm.
and it really spoke to a need. So there is a time and place element.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think when you're doing community-led go-to-market,
Mm.
you're creating natural word of mouth element of being brought in. But I
Mm.
think what you also we invested in a lot of things that are really, really hard to
Yeah.
attribute.
Okay.
So, like content, for
Mm.
example, we ensured that we um, would go and get the thought leaders in the industry and
Hmm.
ask them to contribute to our blog.
So just
Uh,
expanding on domain expertise, really, and
yeah,
knowledge.
we didn't
Yeah,
really.
building knowledge
Did,
base. Yep.
some of them didn't use the product at all.
Hmm.
It was just mostly around ensuring that we were looked at as like the beacon of understanding their problems, purely because we
Okay.
knew everyone. And we saw the way that we viewed anything like that is like if we were having an interview with someone
Yep.
who's like a thought leader, that
Mm.
is doing a customer interview. It's just with a customer you don't have yet. And
True.
so it's got like a dual impact, is
Hmm.
that like we would share that around the organization. So we would always look for the first and second order impact of everything.
Hmm.
Um, and even if we couldn't find because content marketing is really, really hard to justify.
It
Uh,
can be. It's a long game too. It's a
yeah,
big investment, long game.
always.
It and then you over the years sometimes you see traction in content, and people out there put one or two posts up and expect or content articles up and they expect traction. They're kidding themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
24-year
Yeah.
offset is the way that a 24 month, sorry.
24
God,
years, a very long time. 24 months
24
sounds like, yeah,
better. 24-month
yeah,
offset is what I would say is like I
yeah.
found a lot of the time. But what I did is when I first started, I went
Mhm.
around to some of the other founders that were backed by the same venture capital firm, and I asked
Okay.
them, as related to go to market, what's the one thing that you wish you did, like, from day dot that now you're sort of kicking yourself for?
Mm.
And they said creating content
Yeah,
for our ideal customer profile.
got it.
Um, and I found that very interesting. I took that seriously.
Hmm.
Um, and ran with that as a concept.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I think that is really, really important, which is less on the sales side, marketing side, more on the sales side, is founder-led sales. So I almost think every founder should be selling. They know their product so intimately. But some of the first things they do is go and hire a salesperson and then put all of that on them. And I think that that often really impacts the community-led growth. Like something that really works is purely just someone talking to the person that thought of the product, and you create natural advocacy
Mm.
doing that. Um, it's much like everyone loves to just talk to the boss,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
and
it
more special.
that's what I found around startups that always works. If the founder's selling, and that drives into title a little bit. Some
Yeah,
other areas that I found is the founders always looking after VCs and supporting that angle and raising capital, so which takes away from the selling of the product. We've had managing that we'll get to, but I think that's a bit of a challenge that some founders can
mm,
find themselves in at times. I've seen in my sort of network. One more
mm,
question on content. How much
yeah,
content was Dovetail putting out? What would you see? How many articles? Let's
yeah.
talk numbers. Just give people a bit of context of the reality of the investment here as well.
It would fluctuate between when we we would often get a little bit
Yeah.
nervous that we were spending too much time doing it. And
Okay.
so we might like oscillate out and then
Yeah.
oscillate back in. But
Yep.
I would say consistency is key. And
Mm.
if you could find a way to do like two long form articles a month. Now
Hmm.
I have two different ways that I think about this.
Okay.
You could start with a concept and every week do a LinkedIn post that builds itself up to being an article,
Hmm.
or you could start with a video
Mm.
that then could end up being, when you break it apart, could be the different LinkedIn posts.
Hmm.
So, or Slack posts or X posts, whatever that
Yeah.
looks like, as you break it in, or they might be like within help articles. And that's a big thing is like if you're creating content, you
Hmm.
should only, you should like, you create the piece
Mm.
either at the start or if it just depends on your mindset. Some people,
Yeah.
we always created it at the
It's
start.
more, from what I find, for me, video works best because I
Yes.
prefer to speak. I create when
Mm.
I speak rather than sit behind a keyboard. But others like to type. So my business
Yes.
partner who would sit there and just write an article, just crunch it out and type it. Whereas I would loop through an article and just take me too long. That's some of
What
the things
I,
that I found. I think everyone's different, so I think you just find
yeah.
your little sweet spot there.
But even if it is video,
Yeah.
what I find with video is it has the best repurposing
Hmm.
opportunity.
Yeah.
So video you can turn into audio, video you can turn into written, video you
Hmm.
can turn into can be a long form and you can do little clips. Like I think it does lend itself best. The
Hmm.
issue I find with most founders and video is they are optimizing for incredibly high quality from the get-go
Mm.
because great founders
Yeah.
love high quality.
Yeah.
And so then they get stuck in this motion of thinking that it needs to be
Yeah.
perfect before it gets released.
Yeah.
And so if they could remove that pressure for themselves,
Hmm.
then that I think would change a lot of the mechanism about the content they create. Um, Knowing that they have full uh, ownership of it. They
Hmm.
can either, it was a great conversation, it was whatever, and they can cut it up or whatever that looks like, or they don't have to. If they
Mm.
didn't like it, they don't have to do it. What have they lost? An hour of their time.
Hmm.
A written version, I would say on average is half a day to a day minimum.
Mm.
That is just to create the draft, which then gets absolutely ripped apart by everyone else, which means you have to take it back
It's a
and
lot
you're
of effort.
looking at
Yeah, it is a big effort.
yeah, like
100%.
half a like 1.5 days minimum with edits, etc. So I think it's worth really thinking through the time boxing. How are you going to do it? What are you
Hmm.
thinking? How robust does it need to be? Does it need to be supported by data? All that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But I would also say if you are going to do written, really think about guest writers
Yeah.
that
It's a
you
good
know
point.
that
They can
that
add
are
value
looking
to your client, your user base, or your
and they're looking
target
for
audience. Mm.
like everyone wants to be
Yeah.
um wants to better themselves in their own craft, but
Okay.
additionally a lot of people have a lot of things to share.
Yeah, a lot of people like share ideas, especially people in the industry that have been around it for a long time and
Yeah.
have some insights, because the insight is gathered over experience and how long you've been around a space, and all those learnings. And there's the little nuggets that come out. It just depends how you put them down. I think video is a great way. Being too perfect on video slows you down. Agree. I think it's just about this day and age. It's about getting content out there as crisp, as
Yeah.
clean as you can, but not over engineering it, because I think sometimes the mass outweighs the quality in my mind of what I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as well
Mm.
people um engage more with
Hmm.
like I mean there's
Yeah.
studies being done on it, how people engage with authentic video as
Hmm.
opposed to overdone. Like sometimes they can switch off.
Yep.
And
The
so if
switch,
you're
yeah, switch off, and the scripting of the video, and you can just tell it's recorded and it's not off the cuff. I think the off the cuff just cuts through a lot better.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Lots of insights to unpack for people listening in on the podcast. Go to market obviously was a big content strategy for you guys. What else was some key critical factors other than community? Was there anything else that really stood out for you at Dovetail?
Content and community were massive
Yeah.
ones. I
Okay.
think the other elements of traction and
Mm-hmm.
expansion were really in product. We had such, like, one of the founders was or still is, a
Mm-hmm.
amazing product designer. And
Yep.
so when you'd go in, we'd have a lot of like sort of our meetings were often like we'd talk through things, agitate to get results, that kind of thing, in terms of like what are we doing and how are we doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we were talking about onboarding,
Yes.
that was critical because like the onboarding, not now, but
Mm-hmm.
originally with Dovetail, now
Mm-hmm.
it's seamless, but originally was actually quite hard to start uploading all of your past information up there for it to create this centralized customer brain
Mm-hmm.
concept. And so, you'd lose some people during onboarding.
There's
They
a lot
might
of
think,
energy and effort at the beginning,
yeah,
right?
I'll come back to it. Don't worry
Yeah,
about it, whatever
because they
that
probably
might
don't
look like.
understand at that moment in time the value of the process, because
I
you're not
think they
really getting the value.
understand.
Yeah,
They totally
yeah,
understand because
yeah,
it's a category creator. It was
mm.
against an old way of working. So it's not as
Yeah.
if there's
It's
all
true.
this stuff
Yeah, yeah,
available.
yeah.
It's mostly like
Mm-hmm.
I want to get to the outcome as
Mm.
quickly as possible.
Okay.
And so usually we might have like someone who is
We
in the
can be a little
product.
bit impatient, can't we?
Yeah,
Sometimes.
oh, absolutely. So we
Yeah,
have someone who's in the product and they might return back a week later and then they might
mm,
return back 2 weeks later. And you can see almost that experience of them going like, "Oh, I know I need to do this,
mm-hmm.
but how am I going to do this?" And so I think
Okay.
even like the designer mentality means that you go in and
Mm-hmm.
you walk people through this, both the onboarding in product and onboarding via email. How are you helping people get to where they need to go? Um, and so that's not necessarily like um, you know, net new go to market, but it's a
Mm,
very incredible part of the flow. And I think not enough people break down the entire journey and
mm,
go like, this is a sticking point, this is a sticking point, this is a sticking point, and solve it. Not usually people go, well, if it's in product, it's in product. The product team will deal with that. Absolutely not. You pull in a marketer and you go, how
mm.
would you solve for this? And vice versa. Like at one stage, the head of design was simultaneously the head of marketing
Yeah,
almost because like we bled so much
yeah.
into different roles that just it just made sense.
Just on a note on product, engineers won't be able to solve those challenges because they will get used to the workarounds and the process themselves because it becomes normalized. So you need outside influence and people coming in. Otherwise, you see something that's sticky, but you know it. So I know I have to just click this button, I'm through. You
Yeah.
don't really see that as a sticky point or a person getting lost unless you've got some really good analytics behind it and bits and pieces supporting it. But that's some
Yes.
thoughts I've seen around the space in product.
But I think it's the closeness to the customer. So like an engineer will absolutely know if
Yep.
they are having,
Hmm.
so there was an element of like everyone in the company should be
Yep.
trying to talk, like
To the
they should be on
customers, right?
a demo.
Hmm.
They should be talking to customers like directly, not like you go and do that,
Hmm.
then we bring back the information. Because I mean, I think that's the thing, it's a customer research platform. So we have
Yep.
to kind of like
Yeah, to
live
really
and
dig
breathe.
in on that. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Um, and so like
Right.
I think that's the way that engineers now, I also have to say like some of
Yeah.
the um like that customer obsession
Hmm.
had you kind of had to be like that
Mm.
to do well at Dovetail,
Okay.
purely because like that it's just part of the DNA.
Hmm.
And so would they build something without testing it directly with a customer? No. And I think
Okay.
that element as well is like what we had is we had this thing called demos every
Hmm.
Friday, which is like it's a huge thing that engineering teams do,
Hmm.
but not everyone in the company.
Mm.
Whereas at Dovetail, every single person in the company had to demo something that they'd built that week.
Yeah, well,
And so like whether you're a marketer, customer
yeah.
success, is it an
Also, just
email?
everyone's talking about everything. Yeah, it's getting good conversation flowing.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
so that might be where you learn about, and usually someone will pull up a customer video during
Hmm.
that period and they're
Right.
like, I saw this video and this is how I fixed it.
Mm.
Um, and that's like, everyone like applauds that type of behavior. That's like, that you're put on a pedestal if you really, really look for those customer sticky points.
It goes down to a value-based proposition, right? What are the values of the organization? And
Yeah,
clearly,
absolutely.
customer success and customer insight and
Yes.
customer research was top of the pile there in terms of
Yeah.
how you can drive that at Dovetail. So that is setting it up for success in that way, and that's how you drive success. Not to mean that's the only way to drive success for people out there, but it is definitely be obsessed about something. You can be great about something in any organization or business and do quite well. What is it? And I think stand for something, and clearly that's what you stood for at Dovetail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah,
obsess over the customer and keep an eye on competitors,
yeah.
but don't do it the other way around.
Yeah, if you're just focusing on competition, you've got no insight. You don't know what the competition's doing or where they're creating their concepts from, and if they're doing them behind the curtain and just throwing stuff out at the market and testing that way, that's a very expensive way to build product. So you don't know what the customer's really driving or doing. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah. Yeah, let's look at we're getting close to wrap up, but I wanted to talk a little about how you jumped into title and
Yeah.
where that experience came from and why you went down this VC route uh, out of a startup. What was it for you to jump over and make it to step into title?
So I think uh, during the rounds that we did at the fundraising rounds at Dovetail, I
Yep.
was increasingly interested in the mechanism of venture capital.
Hmm.
Um, and, we had such great investors that I was sort of like, well, this is interesting. They take their learnings across their portfolio and they're able to apply them to different problems, and so they have experience with a Series B investor that they can apply with a seed investment. And so uh, during that time, I was sort of just chatting to people in the market, and Tidal really stood out to me because it's operator led. So you have
Hmm.
professional VCs who are
Yes.
mostly ex-bankers, and then you
Hmm.
have operational VCs. In Australia, you don't have that. It's not such a clear partition. In the
Hmm.
US, it's like those are the two
There's
types.
the two types.
Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and I feel like Tidal, um, you know, we have an amazing team. Wendell, who is one of the founders, he is ex head of product from Atlassian. Um,
Okay.
Grant McCarthy was running like the M&A mechanism for Yahoo back in the day in Asia Pac, and
Yeah.
so just like
Some
a
great experience on the tools, not just from a banking and finance perspective. Yeah.
hundred
Yeah.
percent
And I
like
think,
was
yeah, if you're
at like
looking for a
transaction.
VC, you want value add in my mind, not just cash.
Yeah,
Cash
and
gets you
so
so
I think
far.
as well.
Yeah.
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 And I think there is enough capital that
Mm.
you can,
Yeah.
like, I know that that's actually not fair, like you it's not super easy to get money.
Mm.
But I think it's also like you should be also going, what am I going to get out of my VC?
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can take cash, but what are you taking for that? Because um you could do an amazing, amazing pitch and probably get cash if it's like solving a problem that's very, very interesting to that particular venture capitalist you're talking
At the
to.
time. Yes, correct.
But it should go both ways. Like,
Mm.
why would you give up, a between 12 and 20% stake in your business, unless you're getting something in return? Because it's a marriage. Like, it's 10 years that that person will be on your board every single month, drilling you. Hopefully not, but really,
Hopefully it's a,
sparring
yeah, correct. A value add.
sparring
Yes.
on like
Mm.
where you need to go to, and really pushing you to innovate and all the amazing conversations. And so
Mm.
it's not a short period of time.
Hmm.
And so the way that we often talk about it, it's patient capital. Like, it's a 10-year closed-end fund.
Mm.
So we're patiently working with our founders. And the way that we think about it is we don't want our founders to go like, these are 50 things they did for me this year. We want them to have, like, at the end of each year or quarter, we want to be like, Title helped us with these two massive like problems or directions or strategic points, and have that narrative just super crisp. And I think that's what you should be looking for. Like, if you get handed off to whatever, it's great being in an ecosystem, but I think you really want to go like, what is that VC going to do for me,
Mm,
as opposed to just capital? Because I don't know that once you get the capital and you have them on your board, whether it's going to be enough if 9 years down the track you're talking about an exit and they're not aligned to you.
mm.
It's got
Yeah,
to
it's
be,
difficult,
it's a
isn't
it's
it?
a
Those
marriage.
conversations, yeah,
Yeah,
you got to be on the same
exactly.
page, right? So it is
And I
a
think,
marriage. They're a partner.
yeah,
That's the reality.
precisely.
And if it's not a great
So,
relationship, it's not going to serve the business nor the founders very well. Yes. Mm, yeah.
that's what really pulled me to Tidal,
Hmm.
is that operator
Yeah.
background. Um, and it's the mentality of everyone's pulling stuff they're learning in some
Hmm.
portfolio companies over to other ones. And that was really what attracted me. Because it's like, it is the same concept. We're a very small team. We're like
Yes.
10 people. So we're
Okay.
like a
Well, it's a
startup.
startup in itself, right? And
Yeah.
how many founders would you be working with or businesses at once, really?
Yes. Our portfolio is
Yeah.
about 32 companies at the
Okay.
moment.
Yeah.
It's growing because we're currently deploying out of our third fund.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like it's they're all at different stage. They could be
Hmm.
at Series C stage or
Yes.
they could be at seed stage.
Hmm.
And so what the way we structure it is there's usually a partner that's matched to each of these investments, and then there's another invest team member, and they're working with them day in, day out. I would say most people in the team are um, they're incredible investors, but they are um, just expert company builders. Like that's what brings them
That's the
energy.
important piece, right? In terms of
Yeah,
founders may be great in a particular space, have a really good domain knowledge, some skill sets, but building companies may not be their wheelhouse. And the reality is, unless they've done it before, it isn't their wheelhouse. You need to learn this on the fly. And that's
yeah,
the backing of, from a VC perspective, is this person capable of learning? Can we influence? How can we support them in this journey? Because they know the journey better than you do, technically, especially coming in first time founder for sure. If he's exited, it's probably a different conversation. But first time founders, it's you need that support around you. You don't know everything, and you're going to have to. You're on a learning journey. That's what business is all about, in my mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's bang on. Um, and I think uh, we almost want that complementary relationship
Mm.
where they are subject matter experts. They are a dog with a bone on the problem that they're solving for
Yeah.
their particular industry. And then you have that like person who is what is available to you,
Hmm.
that you can talk through the strategic imperatives that you need to work out. But like you never want to take your eye off the prize when you're thinking about like customer and the problem you're solving.
Hmm.
But no one's going to know that as intimately as you do, because
Correct.
usually a lot of our founders come from the industry which they're because we invest in like usually vertical software or
Hmm.
vertical AI,
Yep.
and so they will deeply know their industry, but do they know how to commercialize that in
Mm.
the right way or
And
in
that's
the way
probably the
that will get
gap
the most
you can
profit?
support them in, clearly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
it's definitely where we play.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it was such a clear um, movement going from Dovetail, where the
Hmm.
two people that started Dovetail were both ex-Atlassians,
Yeah.
to Tidal, where Wendell is ex-Atlassian. There's a very particular type of person that
Hmm.
has worked at Atlassian for a while, and the way that they speak, the way that they engage, it's the cultural value system that Atlassian creates, where they are obsessed with the customer, very first principles thinking,
Hmm.
um, don't get too like personal. You almost want to argue stuff out that's actually useful to drive towards an outcome. Those are all hugely Atlassian traits. And
Okay.
so it was like, not to mention,
Mm.
um, the Dovetail founders are closely connected with the Tidal founder. So it's like,
Yeah.
it was a bit of a
It
no-brainer.
sort of
It's like
works for it's a nice little marriage there, and you've
yeah.
probably experienced the way they operate before, obviously jumping in.
I
Yeah,
have
being
a
around.
huge
Yeah,
amount of respect for the
yeah.
type of
Hmm.
uh, founder or type of person
Yes.
that the Atlassian culture and values has created, because I think it is very unique, and I don't know that I have seen it in other big organizations
Hmm.
globally, and which is why I have a lot of trust that as an ecosystem, Australia, I already know that we're, definitely batting above our average, but I think just because we're like very capital efficient in nature, we have a small market, so therefore we know we have to go global. There are also reasons why we are naturally going to do very well. But organizations like Atlassian and Canva, safety culture, the have the way that people strive for excellence is going to make us uniquely set up for
Mm.
success as a nation within tech talent. And so I feel very positive about the ecosystem at the moment because of that.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating take on where you see the ecosystem and what some of those
Yeah.
l- leaders of tech in Oz have done for, and left a legacy behind of people that they've
Yeah.
nurtured, trained, and left some influence on clearly that are now impacting in other ways, i.e., Tidal, and I think you mentioned Dovetail through there. It's interesting, fascinating to hear what the impact has been. Um,
Mm.
in terms, Liz, I think we'll probably cut it there. It's been a pleasure getting you on board. If anyone wants to learn more about Tidal, it sounds like a fascinating ZC fund. How can they find out a little bit about you guys?
Just head on over to titlevc.com if you
Yeah,
like, or you can just LinkedIn message me,
yeah.
Liz Ross, um, and
That's
then
probably the
we
easiest
can.
path to having a conversation. But thank you, Liz. Thanks for joining us. Good luck with the year ahead because it's still early in, but already a couple of months gone, so it goes pretty quickly, doesn't it? And there's plenty
Yeah,
happening in your world. Thank you, Liz. Really appreciate your time on the Dev Ready podcast.
cheers. Bye.